I was doing a hit yesterday with my buddy Eric Asher over in New Orleans, inside of his radio show. Inside New Orleans is the name of his radio show. It was on a regular Thursday hit down there with him. I was on with Sean Fox up in Monroe yesterday afternoon for a regular Thursday 3:30 hit with the North Louisiana crew, and both were curious about what was going on in the transfer portal with LSU, and we've seen some guys over the last couple of days really start to make some moves and get into the portal. Offensive linemen have really shook up, right? We've seen Cam Wire go in, we've seen Marcus Dumerville go in, we've seen Xavier Hill go in, and I'm not trying to spin this. I'm not trying to sunshine pump. I'm telling you my honest feelings. I think that's a good sign. I really do. I think that says exactly what we've been thinking is happening, is that the cavalry's coming. There's a whole different type of player that's showing up at LSU, and they're showing up in numbers. I mean, when you think about the offensive line room and what it looks like right now without those guys in it, right? Xavier Hill, Marcus Dumerville, and Cam Wire, who have all played. They've played. Now, Dumerville hadn't played as much as Cam Wire, and Xavier Hill hadn't played as much as him, but they've all played and taken reps and been on the field. And when you look around now and you see in front of you a couple of true freshmen, if you're Cam Wire and Marcus Dumerville, and you look up at the tackle spot and you see Emory Jones and Will Campbell are freshman All-Americans, and then you look what's coming in Tyree Adams out of St. Aug, and Zalance Hurd out of Neville, and a couple of other guys like DJ Chester and Mubanga from Georgia who's coming in. I mean, you're talking about two back-to-back offensive line classes that are stacked with elite 4-5-star talent, guys that immediately come in and play. I'm anxious to see what they do with Hurd and Emory Jones. Really, I mean, like, how could you even consider moving Emory Jones inside after the freshman season that he had? Well, you bring in another recruit that can start or play early in his days at LSU and seems like he might be best suited as a tackle. We had Emory Jones on before the season started, asked him specifically, where was LSU talking about playing you? Where are you most comfortable? He said he ran the interior spot during the Under Armour All-American game and absolutely fell in love with it. And that during the recruiting process, there were discussions on whether or not they were going to kick him down inside. So now, I mean, you're talking about an offensive line. And if you're reading the clippings on DJ Chester, he's another one that could come in and push for time early. I don't have any expectation on any of these true freshmen to be Emory Jones or Will Campbell. I think it's unfair. It's almost and nearly impossible to do what these two guys have done here in their freshman season, and to expect that to happen consistently is just, I mean, that's daydreaming, right? I mean, that's fantasizing. That just doesn't happen. But when you bring in guys of the caliber that they're bringing in this class on the heels of what they brought in last year, don't forget about Fitzgerald West and Bo Bordelon in that class too. You know, I mean, Campbell and Jones deserve all of the attention and bring that offensive line group a lot of notoriety. But that freshman class also had two other prospects in Fitzgerald West and Bo Bordelon in it that they are very excited about. I think the prospect of West potentially playing center and the weight that Bordelon was able to add on in his redshirt freshman season has been a very positive sign for the entire class. So when you look around and you see two freshmen All-American on this team, a couple of redshirt freshmen in West and Bordelon that are making their way through the pipeline and trying to find the field pretty soon here, backed up with another recruiting class that includes 5-star talent like Zalance Hurd, one of the state's top offensive linemen in Adams out of St. Aug. Guys from outside of the state like DJ Chester, who's going to push and play, and a guy like Mubanga, who seems like he's a bit of a project, but, under Kelly, Brad Davis, this offensive staff, he's got all the tools and the essentials that you look at and say, that's what you need to be successful in the SEC as an offensive lineman. So, I mean, I'm not trying to spin it, and I'm not trying to tell you that, when you have guys leaving that it's a good thing. But when you've got guys leaving at one specific group like LSU has had with the offensive line, and now you're starting to see it with the defensive backfield over the last couple of days, to me, where LSU is in the process, this is a good sign. It's a good sign because it means that they got some dudes on the way. And the depth in the roster is significantly changing its identity. I mean, LSU is going to be built around the line of scrimmage from here moving forward on both sides of the ball. I mean, that was the formula that LSU dominated the early 2000s with. It wasn't with quarterback play. It wasn't with skill players. It was with nasty get-after-you defense. And they own the lines of scrimmage. They may not have had a quarterback, but they always had an offensive line that they could run behind.
And always had a running back.
Yeah,
and
always had running backs.
They'll always have that. Don't you think that, I don't know if you want to keep going through the headlines or if you want me to jump in right now, but I would say even the Bo Bordelons of the world are probably looking over their shoulder, because it seems like even last year's recruiting class is probably a little shook by how they recruited this year's offensive line, at least.
I don't know for sure how they feel about it, but I know that Bordelon feels real confident where he was
a year ago.
Right now. No, I mean,
okay.
I know that they've been very excited about the way that he has put on weight, on the way that he is, carried the weight. Look, man, his dad was a big-time player at LSU. I mean, he comes from an extremely talented bloodline and somebody that has always wanted to play here his entire life. I mean, it's going to take a lot to get Bordelon, in my opinion, to look outside of LSU, if he even would. I don't even know if he even would. I think that he'll stay and compete here for the entire time. And that's just me speaking on speculating. He hasn't told me that. I don't know that for certain, but I know their family a bit and have been around them and him for a while. It's the same thing with Walker Howard.
I was going to say the same thing with Jack Besh.
Well, no, it's different for a guy like Besh, in my opinion. It really is. I think that when you talk about Walker Howard and Bo Bordelon, you're talking about guys that their dads were and are best of friends. So when Walker and Bo were born, they knew each other from the first day they came home from the hospital together, and all they knew was that Bo's dad was the center and Walker's dad was the quarterback at LSU. And that's all they've ever known. And they've heard those guys tell stories. They've heard those guys talk about those times. They've seen those guys be treated the way they are when they go to LSU and inside the stadium and when they walk around campus. And that is something that those two young men, I believe, have grown up saying to one another, that our time will be here and we are going to live it up. We're going to dominate it.
Legacies.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna make this work. And while Besh comes from a family that played for LSU, right? Both of his uncles played at LSU, and Blaine and Brett Besh. There's not that immediate tie to it of what the story of Walker and Bo Bordelon are in LSU football's legacy through their dad. And I'm not saying that they have to live in their dad's shadow. I think that they've looked at those experiences that their parents had and have said to one another, we want our time. And we want that experience. We want to be able to go to the fishing camp and talk about games like they've seen and heard their dads do their entire life. And I really believe that means something to both of those guys. Now, the offensive line room is jam-packed. The quarterback room is jam-packed with big-time elite talent. So, by no means do they get free passes to the field because their dads were players of the past in the program. But I believe that means something to their motivation,
And I would take it a step further and say that even if you are a legacy like those are, I think even though Taviano's not from Louisiana, whenever you get to the NIL thing and all of that conversation, I still think there's some merit to people that would just want to play for LSU because of the weight that it bears in terms of what kind of it brings to the table. It just feels a little bit different strapping it up for LSU, and you're seeing it in this recruiting class, and I think Brian Kelly's playing into it a little bit, and you're seeing it with Denver Harris a little bit, where some cats just want to go play for LSU. Like Denver Harris, obviously, I guess you could say not from Louisiana, but definitely feels like he's from Louisiana. And it's one of those things that LSU will never really lose as long as they're competitive, where it's a brand that's a little bit different because you want to be able to say you played for LSU whenever you go back home, whenever you go to Thanksgiving, go to Christmas, talk to your boys. You're like, I've always wanted to be here. And I think you see a little bit of that with like a Bo Bordelon, and I would have said Besh, but like that's what makes it a little difficult because I never saw him leaving, which made me think about Bordelon, but certainly in Walker Howard's case and certainly probably in Bo Bordelon's case and hopefully in Denver Harris's case.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see. And with the defensive backfield now, I mean, you're starting to see similar type of shakeup, right? I mean, some guys that are either leaving like Mekhi Wingo and heading to the NFL, or guys like freshman cornerback
Mekhi Gardner.
Mekhi Gardner. I'm sorry, not Wingo. Or like freshman cornerback Jalen Davis Robinson, who entered the transfer portal yesterday, to even a guy like Dalen Austin, who's committed to the class right now, that's starting to backpedal a little bit because I don't know if he sees talent incoming or if LSU's sending him a message that things are shaking and changing up. But yesterday felt like the first domino to fall with Taviano in the secondary as he picked LSU. Pretty smooth announcement. I thought it was a smooth. It brought the Louis Vuitton bag out.
Yeah, well, that I'm sure a lot of people were getting Colorado vibes.
I thought
got the Louis with me.
It did kind of have some Colorado vibes to it when I saw the Louis Vuitton bag
did
come
he pull
out.
an Oregon hat out?
I was, because it was Texas. I thought it was Michigan that he pulled out, but it was Texas A&M, Michigan, and LSU, who the decision was out of.
Well, that goes to show how close Taviano played it to how close he played it to the vest. Where even Shea was like, "Look, the only thing that I can tell you," because he was even up to Wednesday, he was like, "Look, all I can do is tell you what I've seen, and what I like to do, and this is from Shea's perspective, is look at their actions, not their words." He's like, "The only place he's visited is LSU. He spurned a couple of other visits." He didn't visit Texas, Oklahoma when he could have. Like, he was invited, didn't go, said he was going to go, didn't go.
Yeah, that is an Oregon hat.
That was bizarre.
It is an Oregon hat. It's weird.
And then he goes to Texas A&M, but he wears the black-on-black LSU hat at the visit, and it's like, all right, a little subliminal message. But when you get into recruiting, you don't want to dig that deep. But Shea was like, look, the only place he's ever actually visited, unofficially and officially, is LSU.
Yeah.
So I have to ride that for what it's worth, and it turns out that was the case. But I don't want to say a bizarre recruiting with Taviano, but just somebody that kind of played it straight, like didn't play really any games. He just didn't say anything.
Yeah. No, he was as quiet, as a guy through the process that you'll find. I mean, a lot of these guys love to talk. Some of them don't talk at all. But for the most part, Taviano just kind of took his visits, gathered his information, and
made his decision.
Yeah, making his decision yesterday. And it seems like LSU's going to stick here. And like we said, hopefully this is the first domino to fall with, kind of the reconstruction of DBU. DBU is built on big name guys. Sure, they've had some unsung heroes. Guys like Tyrann Mathieu have come through there and has been, someone that highly exceeded any expectation that you had for him. But for the most part, I mean, it's been guys like Patrick Peterson to Derek Stingley, right? I mean, and everybody in between there. That was, a big time guy. Greedy Williams was somebody who came in with accolades in high school that felt like he was going to be a big time player. Grant Delpit was a big time player in high school. He felt like he was gonna check out once he got to LSU. I mean, even guys like Thorold Simon, when they came in, Morris Claiborne had high expectation of how they were going to perform in the defensive backfield. Eric Reed was a 5-star safety out of Dutchtown coming in. I mean, they've had guys that are high-end players, personalities come through here that they have developed into, big-time players. Christian Fulton, I mean, guys that came in, you knew was going to be a stud, turned out to be better than you even thought they were going to be, and now going on and playing on Sundays and making a ton of money. I mean, that's what DBU is. And guys like Taviano, if you can close a guy like Denver Harris over the next couple of days, which I believe LSU is sitting in a fantastic spot with, and then pick up a guy like Desmond Ricks, who's the number 1 cornerback in this class, who was seemingly, kind of loved LSU this entire cycle. That's how you get it back. I mean, that's exactly the formula of revitalizing and reviving, DBU. Just on 5-star guys, number 1 players at spots, transfer portal guys that come in with some swagger and with some ratings of their own. I mean, if you were to pick up Harris, Ricks on the heels of getting the commitment from Taviano, how do you feel about the defensive backfield? I mean, do you care that Dalen Austin is decommitted and that Robinson is in the transfer portal and Mekhi Gardner is off to the league? Not really. I mean, like that. If you're going to replenish it with that, that's the formula to get back to DBU pretty quick.
And I think it speaks to how Brian Kelly talked about the portal, right? Where he's like, we don't want to build. This is him rebuilding through recruiting as opposed to we got to go to the portal and pluck people out every single year. At some point, you have to be able to say, look, we're going to have some freshmen out there that are going to play, and they're 3-year guys. And Taviano fits that bill. Desmond Ricks fits that bill. I would say Denver Harris, can, even though he's not a 3-year guy, can he redshirt? Did he play more than?
I don't know that. I don't think so.
Because you played.
I think
he
played
six
6 games.
Yeah,
I think he played 6.
Jimbo. But guys like that, to where you're not going to get like as good as Mekhi Gardner was, you don't want to do it like that every year, to where you're having to reestablish culture with the guys that you bring in. At some point, the old way is the way to build through recruiting, right? Because you want to be able to cultivate culture when they're 18 as opposed to 20 and played for 2 different coaches.
No, absolutely. No, the way to rebuild a program is through recruiting, but you can just get there faster now with the transfer portal. LSU will be a great example for how to restore a roster in a year. I mean, people will look at the example of LSU playing that Texas Bowl against Kansas State with, almost like severely dangerous numbers. Like it was almost dangerous what they did. Not to say that they put people in harm, but the numbers weren't there. I mean, if they would have lost a couple of guys at spots, I mean, they would not have been able to play. They would have had to like take players and move them to different positions that they never played before in their life. And to be the SEC Western Division champs 10 months later is a crazy success story.